podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Pamela Robinson, and I am super excited once again to have you all back with me in this audio space and in the virtual spaces. We're streaming live tonight on the Dr. Pamela Robinson Facebook page and on the Lotus Flower YouTube channel. We also will be streaming on all of the audio platforms after Thursday. After I've had an opportunity to go in and edit the podcast, I will be uploading that to the audio platforms, and you will be able to watch and or listen at that time 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, I want you to be sure to like, comment, and to subscribe to the Lotus Flower podcast. In doing so, each time the episode airs, you will never miss one of these life changing, empowering episodes. Now, this evening, I have with me a very special guest, a long term friend of mine, and I want to bring her on the screen. And I want you all, first of all, before I bring her on the screen, I want you to go ahead and tell your friends, families, and loved ones and your social media network that Dr. Pamela is in the room tonight, and she has an amazing guest that's going to tell you her life story, and one of resiliency, one that I am sure you will be changed for the better because of what you will hear coming from this amazing woman of God. Before we do, I'm going to go ahead and start with this countdown screen, and then I will be bringing back onto the platform after I read her intro, my friend, none other than Miss Tiffany. So stay tuned. Be sure to go ahead and let others know that we're on and share right now. You're doing it right. Okay, be right back with you. Yes, I am once again excited to bring to you season number 3, episode number 37 of the Lotus Flower podcast. Our title tonight is A Life of Resiliency. I am your host, Dr. Pamela Robinson, and I am so excited to bring to you one of my amazing friends. She is a former classmate of mine and one of the cohort members of my Masters of Social Work program from 2009 from Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We went through 3 long years together, along with several other students, as we were all pursuing our Masters of Social Work degree. Now, Ms. Tiffany Mielke is a licensed master's clinical social worker, therapist, and certified advanced alcohol drug counselor. She is currently in the process of being certified in M and in certified in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. She is the founder and CEO of Serenity Counseling LLC in Grand Junction, Michigan. Now, as we talk about the topic this evening of resiliency, the word resiliency comes from physics and it describes the quality of materials that regain their shape after they have been bent, compressed, and stretched. Positive psychology talks about the difference between surviving and thriving. Now, I believe that we return to our original shape after we have survived such trauma in our lives that we are able to come back and move forward in a state of resiliency. Now, some folks feel that when life gives you pain and trauma, that you'll never be able to return back to the original shape that the Lord had orchestrated for you before the foundation of the world. But I believe that when life gives you this type of pain and you experience trauma, that this particular situations that we go through in life, and all of us do, just have a few birthdays if you haven't, that I believe that those situations actually transform us for the better. Now, when life gives us lemons, what we have to do is learn how to put on those lenses, the lenses that shows us how to look beyond the surface and see what is the purpose of why I'm going through this situation. However, there are times in life that our faith is tested and we aren't able to endure, especially if you are a little child and different things are happening to you and you have no words for it and you don't know how to actually live through situations. You're just learning how to be formed and shaped. And then, even as adults, sometimes we go through traumatic events and we have no idea why it's happening and how to get through it. It's in those times that sometimes we make poor choices and we may end up going through situations that cost us things, things that are negative in perspective. But I'd like to tell you that there is a man named Jesus Christ that's able to transform those negative situations into positive situations. The painful hurts, hardships, and trials that we go through, they are able to be transformed. Why? Because of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. My friend, Miss Tiffany, has a story of true resiliency. Her childhood was very difficult. It was filled with domestic violence, child abuse, and sexual assault. Her parents were both cross addicted drug addicts, and the genes for addiction was handed down to her. She moved out of her childhood home at the tender age of 18, with law enforcement being involved. She was homeless for a few weeks until she found someone to let her stay with them. During that time, she worked so hard to save money so that she could get her own place. She moved to Chicago at the tender age of 19 and she just tried to figure things out. There, she met her first husband and she was married. When married to her first husband, she figured out things that were not so good in that marriage and found herself in an abusive relationship with a small child trying desperately to make it. She moved from Chicago to Michigan in 1999. And in this move, she was separated from her husband in 2003 and then divorced in 2004. However, in 2004, being a single mom and a full blown addict, which is from alcohol, during that time, her life changed for the better. In despair, she turned her life over to God. And in doing so, Tiffany was able to obtain and maintain sobriety. She met and married her current husband of 17 years. And with his help, earned her master's in social work. Upon graduating, she was employed by the state of Michigan in child welfare work in foster care specialist. She worked as a CPS worker, a licensing specialist, and she worked as a team specialist. Also, her last position with the state was as a data analyst. She stayed with the state for 15 years until she simultaneous. But however, sometimes they do. So I want to have you start with when you were a little girl. First of all, what are some of the things that you enjoyed doing when you think about when you were a little girl, Tiffany, and you know how we are kids and we all carefree and fancy free and all. What are some really fond memories that you had from a little girl?
Well, the fondest memories I had, which actually led to me moving in South Haven, was time with my grandparents, because my grandparents to me were like the most perfect people ever. So I enjoyed being with them. Um, I lived in a kind of small town. So when I was really young, we had no air conditioning, but we had this big quarry by our house. So we would go to the quarry and go swimming during the day, which was pretty much it, and Slurpees until we had brain freezes. That would probably be the crux of what it was like when I was little, the fun things.
Oh, cool. So your grandparents, they were a big influence in your life, you'd say then.
You know, they were, I try to explain to a lot of people that because I worked in child welfare for so long and I worked with a lot of foster parents, and I would always tell them that sometimes um, you won't have them for long. You just need to be that example of what good is. You need to be that light, because once someone sees it, they know it's there. And my grandparents, that's what they were for me. So even though there was bad things happening, I could call my grandmother, and my grandmother was wise beyond her years because she taught me guided imagery. She would have me read the Bible to her until I fell asleep, because at that time I was very little. I was alone, having to care for my younger brother. And they just gave me so much love that, it helped carry me through some very difficult times.
Yes, and also when you talked about those grandparents being the guiding light, the reason I wanted to talk about a fond memory is because I like to say that that was a foundation that the Lord was planning for you because He foreknew some of the things that were going to come out of your life that weren't going to be so pleasing and and as palatable. But because God is a loving God, you know, with that foundation already being there, with your grandparents being loving and being the light, and your grandmother literally having you read the Bible, that foundation, like I'm doing in my hand right here and putting this on top, I believe the foundation was being planted for you to have a seed of resiliency inside of you, even as a little girl, after you had experienced some things that I'll have you talk about if you want to share, that there was almost like a stabilizing force in you that of course you wouldn't have known as a little kid. But I believe because God loved you so and He already had His hand on your life, that He knew you were going to turn into this beautiful woman that was going to love people and help others, that He was not going to let what you went through destroy you. And He already had put that like a real strong cement in you from your grandparents. Now, tell us a little bit about after your grandparents, they loved on you and you loved on them, and your grandma taught you to read that Bible to her and all. But from there were some things that might have occurred in your life that weren't so pleasing and that no kid should have to experience. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some things that went on as when you were a child, when you were living with your mom and your dad?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of domestic violence for sure. My dad was extremely abusive. And, you know, I think that some people have a rating scale of how they would say how bad was it. And it was bad. I mean, punched in the face and like knocked down flight of stairs, choked, kicked, beaten, drugged by my hair. Just, there was I was knocked out cold at least 3 times before I was 12 years old. My dad more than once tried to drown my brother or myself. And of course, I would try my best when my brother was little because he's younger than me. He was in a rage for nothing and tried to drown my brother in a like the Menard 5-gallon bucket that we use for mopping floors. And he
Yes.
tried to drown him in that. And I knew as soon as I said it, like I had to stop him. But I also knew that the second I did that meant that the wrath was going to go to me. But of course, my brother was much smaller and I had to protect him. So, I jumped on top of my father's back to help my brother. And then, of course, I took the rest of the beating that he had planned out for my brother. The unfortunate part is that there were people that were around, but my dad was pretty calculated in the fact that if he was going to do a horrible beating, he tried to keep other people from being around. And at that time, there were anyone that I told that should have helped. And I don't know if anyone is aware of what a domestic violence or an abusive personality type is like, but
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement could be called to our house and my dad would convince them that there was nothing wrong. No matter what, he would convince them they would leave and we'd be left alone again. When I was growing up, I couldn't understand it. I didn't understand why I could be asleep and be awoken being beaten. Like
Oh my.
you're asleep, so you can't do anything. And when I would look back, because when I can remember it being bad, the first memory, which I do have kind of trauma brain, which means there's like large gaps in my memory, but like 8 years old. I remember
Mm-hmm.
being 8 years old because we lived in a townhouse and my dad was mad for something. He called on the phone and I could tell just by the intonation in his voice when he was going to go off. And I remember being in the coat closet, hiding in the corner with all the coats on me, trying to hide from him coming home because I knew it would happen. And, you know, I, I still have scars on my body today from what happened to me then. But those scars obviously aren't as bad as the ones that you get because I've never met anyone that ever physically abused people that didn't emotionally destroy them before that started. So I had that as well.
Exactly. That is the emotions that we carry throughout our lives if we don't get the proper therapy or support to actually rid ourselves of those things. Although the trauma from those things will live with us forever, but they don't have to haunt us and cause us not to be able to move forward and form good relationships in our lives. You know,
Correct.
yes, I am in awe of how you are able to talk about this and really talk with such, you still have so much grace, Tiffany, as you're sharing it with the audience, because I know having lived that, I'm sure there was a time in your life that maybe when you shared it, it probably evoked anger and rage at who the dad that was doing this to you. I'm sure it did. And
You know,
yeah.
I
Mhm.
had a lot of rage. But just like the whole iceberg, I didn't understand that my rage was coming from disappointment and from sadness and from hurt. Like all I had was rage. And you know, when I did try to figure out how to forgive, I didn't know how to do that because there was so much to forgive. And um, when I did make the choices to change my life, I kind of then I had to take as much energy figuring out how to forgive. I didn't like it,
Mhm.
and I was definitely resistant to it. Um, but then when I actually, when people would say, you forgive for yourself, not for other people, man, I didn't want to let go. I felt like um, he didn't deserve the forgiveness, right? So I was going to hold on to that. But in holding on to that unforgiveness, it was a chain that held me to him, and it was a chain of pain. And the only way to break it was that I had to forgive him.
And see, and that is what the audience needs to hear. There are people that are going through what you have experienced and that will go through what you've experienced. And they need to know what you just said in order to break that heaviness off of you and that stronghold that had you, you had to go ahead and really forgive him. And I know when we have this cliche that we always do say that forgiveness isn't for, for that other person, it's for me, but you took it a step further and I like how you expounded on that. Yes, we know that is a true saying, but you in order to break like actually break the chain that had you like in a chokehold, you had to go ahead and forgive him. Now,
Yep.
I'm reading a book that's called Crushing. God Turns Pressure into Power by T.D. Jakes, and I'm reading a little bit about it. Says why we suffer, and it says when we suffer, we seek answers. Perhaps it's the desire to regain some semblance of control over circumstances that remind us of our utter powerlessness in certain realities, or maybe it's just our human longing to believe that everything happens for a reason, that all the details of our lives should fit together like a puzzle piece, revealing significance beyond anything we can see from our surface perspectives. So at the same time, we've got to trust God's sovereignty. Yet and still, when these things are happening and we are right smack dab in the middle of them, I'm sure you wonder, and I've wondered, why are we suffering like this? And how are these puzzle pieces going to fit together? So, could you tell us how did those puzzle pieces fit together? When I'm sure you wondered as a little girl, why am I going through this?
Um, I don't have a doubt in my mind about it. For the longest time, um, when I grew up, when I first went to school, I was going to school to do marketing and advertising. There's no way I didn't want to work with anybody that had to do with abuse, and I wanted to have absolutely nothing to do with addiction. Wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to do it. That wasn't me. I was going to just make money, and that was it. Um, Obviously, that didn't work out for me. But even when I was little, my mom said that I was always meant to be a social worker because if I got in trouble at school, it was because I was sticking up for somebody else. That's just kind of how I always was. So that make money at all costs, it wouldn't sit with me.
Mhm.
But as I got older and realized that what had happened was actually like a superpower, so to speak, because when I went into child welfare, I knew what questions to ask. I knew what to look for. I paid attention to if the child was looking at the parent. If I was going to ask something that I was afraid that would get back, I would take the child out of the house, ask the questions, and then say, who else knows this? So I could always give plausible deniability to the kid. And
Mhm.
I did everything in my power to make sure that um, the child wouldn't be left where I was, and I never made false promises. I
Mhm.
gave the kids that were, in my care, code words. And
Mhm.
the code word would be an innocuous word that you could say in a regular conversation that no one would think anything of. And all I needed to know was where you were and to say this word, and I would come for you. And if it wasn't me,
Oh,
I'd send somebody else. And if they said, and my magic word at that time, and I'm not doing it anymore, was chocolate. So if they went to this and they knew they could go to the school office and they could say, yeah, this is so and so, I'm at school indicator, and I want to know when you're going to bring me that chocolate. That meant I had to come right away. And I
oh
did
my.
everything that I could so that even if I couldn't fix it, even if I couldn't stop it, they knew that I would still show up. They knew
That's
that I would never forget them, that what was happening to them was still important to me.
that's
So that
excellent.
so that was part of it. And when I used to run a domestic violence shelter, haha, right? Like really?
Yeah.
And I really began to learn about the domestic violence, batterers cycle. And that helped me understand why my mother was unable to help, because I
Mhm.
knew what had happened to her before I got there. So I knew the damage that had already been inflicted, and I knew that the things that she was doing to help was all she could do. And that allowed me to be able to look back fondly, since both my parents have passed, but it helped me to be able to forgive with her right away in her last, year of life, because she had ALS. And it allowed me, because I would say, I gotta forgive, like, now. I don't have time. I don't have the luxury of time. I got this moment. And being able to look back on those things and understanding what I knew about it allowed me to be able to forgive her right away and to be present and loving to her while I was losing her. So all the experiences that happened allowed me to do better work to help other people, because I I knew what it felt like, and I would never ever be judgmental or disrespectful, because I had been there. And when, a child would say, "Well, you don't know what it's like," and I'd look at them, I'd say, "Oh yeah, I do." And they never questioned it. They looked at me and they'd say, "She understands." It's kind of like a
Right.
hidden language that you speak. They're like, "Oh, she knows. She
Yes.
understands."
So how would you say that helped you with your healing process, being able to help somebody else, a little kid, those little eyes that you knew were hurting? How did that actually help you with your own healing process?
Well, I had to get help first, because what you don't heal from, you're going to go through again. And I didn't want somebody else's pain to kind of freeze me. So I did see therapist, and still do occasionally see a therapist, because, I think therapists should see therapists. You need to have it go somewhere. But
Right.
the most important thing, I think, was, and what I would do is, I knew that all I had to do was help one. If I could help just one, then I had a purpose. My life mattered. If I could do more than that, bonus. But if I could help just one kid or one family, then what I had gone through would at least have made something positive happen. And that's just how I kind of internalized it myself, to say, is this my one? And I'm lucky to have had more than that. Many, many people that have come to me and said that they've helped, and watched kids call me and say that they're CETA scholars and they're going on to school, and to know that I helped those kids. It made my experience, give me insight to help them that I don't know if I would have had otherwise.
That's excellent. So how was your very existence actually threatened when you were going through the situation, when you said in your bio that you were once an alcoholic, and you said there were that gene, which I know came from both your parents being dually dual addicted. So your
Mhm.
very existence at one point was being threatened as an alcoholic yourself. How were you able to actually realize at some point that you had to come clean even with that? And then how did that even evolve for you? How did you actually find yourself in that predicament as a young woman?
Well, I drank a lot because I didn't want to feel. So at that moment, I wasn't doing anything positive for anybody. I was existing, and I honestly
Mhm,
didn't want to exist. I remember um, wishing that I would go to sleep and not wake up, and being mad at God because I woke up. And I
mhm,
had no love for myself at all. And I was going through a divorce, and I remember all I could think is that I hated myself, just absolutely hated myself. And I remember that I had gotten to the point where I knew I had to take care of this small child, because I was going to be all by myself. And I fell to my knees in my kitchen and I prayed to God. I said, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what to do, but I need your help. And
mhm,
that was the beginning of the end for me. There was this, probably, like, it was June 4th of that year, that I was watching something on TV and they were talking about, you know, being saved. And all I could think was, I want to be saved, but of course I didn't think I could be saved because I was such a horrible human being that why would God save me when there's so many other people that were more valuable and worthy of being saved? But I still did the prayer and said, I want to be saved. And then that day when I was in my kitchen on my knees begging for help, and what was the clearest thought in my mind was I go to AA. And I went to AA that day. My hands were shaking. I was absolutely terrified. This was my second time of trying to go there. The first time was not from any real reason other than to appease other people. But the second time was because I wanted to be able to care for my child. And I remember when I went in and I started, and I did, if they would have told me to stand on my hands in traffic, I would have done it because I was in so much pain. I would have done absolutely anything to make it go away. But I did what they said. I got a sponsor. I went to meetings every single day. And the weirdest thing is everyone tells you can't get sober for someone else. That's a negligible point. I got sober for my son. I stayed sober for me because while I was there, I figured out that I didn't have to be that person that I hated, that I actually had an opportunity to have a do-over and like myself. So I kept going, and at some point in time, I started being able to like myself, and I was lucky enough to have some positive people that encouraged me to keep making those changes. And, you know, that's kind of where it all at least began for me.
With
I'm sorry.
with the positive people that were helping you and pouring into you, did those people hold you accountable for what you were presenting? Would you say were they those type of people, or were they the people that kind of went along with everything you were doing because they didn't want to maybe get on your bad side and they wanted to actually just stay friends with you? But and the reason I'm asking this is because sometimes people that are helping us, they can hinder us if they're not willing to show up real strong and maybe even speak to some things that we're doing that aren't really good choices at that time and all. So were these people able to really kind of help you to kind of toe the line and pull you over to where you should be, if that makes sense? She's frozen. Are you there?
I'm here. I'm not sure what happened, but to answer your question, I told you about this individual before, Sherry Mayfield. I worked with her when I used to work for Work First. And Sherry Mayfield, you know, in the beginning, holding me accountable wasn't really so much of a problem because, as I said, I was in so much pain that I would do anything. But what she did is when I would talk to her and um, honestly tell her how I was feeling, what was going on, she just kept encouraging me. The people that I couldn't say that I had friends that would appease me because I don't really think I had too many friends at that point in time. I did a really good job of keeping people away from me. So I had already abandoned anybody that would be beneficial for me. But Sherry Mayfield showed me that I could keep going and it didn't matter how bad things were, that it could get better if I did the right thing.
And then with Miss Mayfield's friendship, when she was walking alongside you and she really kind of, it sounds like she really held you accountable for whatever you were going through. That accountability partner is very, very, very important. So with her being in your life, how how significant was that to the point where it
caused you to really see the real Tiffany, that woman that sometimes we all hide behind, but then the real person shows up after a while, after we've had an opportunity to really be held accountable or go to therapy and start looking at those ugly sides of us, you know.
Well, going through AA, unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to say it, you're forced to look at the ugly quick, fast, and in a hurry. So I didn't have the opportunity to not look at that because I had to go through a program that made me write everything down, talk about it, and work through it. My problem was that she would always tell me how God loved me, and I kept telling her, maybe you. But if God really knew everything that I did, there's no possible way that he would be able to love me. And she just kept trying to explain to me that that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. But then when my son was very young, he did something, I mean, like insignificant. It wasn't a big deal. And he left the room and I was in the kitchen and he came back in and he was apologizing and he said, Mommy, do you forgive me? And I said, honey, I forgave you as soon as you did it. I
Mm-hmm.
said, I forgive you. I said that I may be angry and there may be consequences, but I always, always love you. And it's when I said that to him that I got it.
Oh my! And a light bulb, like an aha moment at that point came on
Yep.
for you. Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Sherry and I was telling her that I was struggling reading the Bible. And she's like, well, how are you reading it? And I was like, how do you read a book? I started the beginning and she's like, oh, no, that's not how you do it. And I said, well, I had gone to church, but I had not been taught how to read the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, let's just start in John. I was like, okay. So,
Okay.
she helped me and I have her, ladies version study Bible, at home that I still have. And, when I was learning how to actually read it, I was lucky that I actually have my grandmother's Bible as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I would have times that would be a struggle, it was nice because I could look back and see where she had highlighted things and had written in the margins. And I would say, oh, she struggled with this too. And it helped like normalize things like other people have problems with
Yeah.
forgiveness. Imagine that, and it just helped me realize that yes, everybody is able to be forgiven and is, able to get love from God. It's not about being worthy, it's about his gift. And as I started to learn what was happening in the Bible and understanding that, just because of where I was didn't mean that I couldn't change and it didn't mean that I couldn't be good. And when I started, my whole plan was I wanted to be a mom that my son could be proud of. I
Yeah.
wanted him to be able to say, not be embarrassed over something I had done. And all I could think is if I get sober now, he probably really won't have any real memory of me drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to have been sober for 19 years, thank goodness.
That's
And
amazing.
but I don't take it for granted. I'm not so special that I don't need to do. I have to do what worked, and
Mm-hmm.
I know it worked, and
Mm-hmm.
I do that so that it helps. I don't have the desire to drink. That's been long since removed, but it helps me to not get into my own head and um, act like a better human being to those that I share the planet with. So that is what I get out of it.
That is great. Now, when you say you do what it takes to maintain your sobriety and to maintain your mental health wellness, tell us what are some of the things that you do to
I
maintain it?
still I still go to meetings. I am going to tell my all the good, the bad, and the ugly of my drinking at the end of this month in an open speaker meeting for other alcoholics because it's important to hear little bits of yourself in other people's story because
Mm-hmm.
then we realize that like there's a piece of this that sounds like me and a piece of that, and it when they look at you, it's hard to believe like you could be sober for that long. It's like, yeah, you can, you can. All you gotta worry about is today. And
Yes.
And that's kind of through all of it. I didn't have to worry about 2 years from now. It was like just today, and
Mhm.
I had a good sponsor that told me, if you make it through today and you don't drink, it's a win.
Mhm.
If that's all you do today, it's a win, because there's nothing that happening in my life that drinking wouldn't make bad quicker.
Mhm.
So, some days, a good enough day is if, I handled my basic responsibilities and I didn't drink. And
Mhm.
as my sobriety grew, then of course my responsibilities grew and I was able to handle more. And I've gone to counselors, and I'm lucky as a social worker. I'm surrounded by social workers. So, um, you don't want to know the truth. Don't be a friend to a social worker, because we're going to say quick, fast, and in a hurry what needs to be said.
That's
It's
right.
not going to be diluted. We
Mhm.
say it from a place of love, but
Right.
they'll say that denial is not just a place in Egypt. You need to,
Mhm.
pay close attention. Are you doing self-care? Are you having good boundaries? And having
Mhm.
those friends around me that I can constantly talk to, it continues to help me.
That is just excellent. Now, just to backtrack just a little bit, however, when you said to the Lord on that kitchen floor that this is it, I've got to stop this. I want to be free of this. Done, finished, got the T-shirt. After doing that, however, did you go into like a rehab program and all, or did you just quit cold turkey,
I,
or yourself at home somehow?
I went to AA meetings. I went to AA meetings every day.
Okay.
In AA, there's a, phrase, 90 meetings in 90 days.
Hmm.
Um, I I was too afraid to be alone with myself, so I called people on the phone. I went to 168 meetings my first 90 days.
Hmm.
Um, I talked to my sponsor and I did what they told me to do. And that's the most important thing, because, Miss Tiffany can get like, I want to change things. And how about if we do it that? No, no, no. Do what,
Hmm.
just keep my mouth closed and do what I'm told to do. And I did that. And it
Hmm.
worked because I did what I was told. I got a sponsor, I spoke to people, I went to meetings all the time. There was a lot of people there with some serious sobriety that are called old timers. And they would, say, "How you doing, kid?" And I'd say, "My life is a train wreck. I hate everything in it." And they're like, "Oh, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." And I was like, "What?
Okay.
What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you didn't come to AA because you were on a winning streak.
Right, right, right.
So if you understand that your life is a train wreck, means that you understand it's a train wreck, and here's the solution for that." And that's what and it was true.
Hmm. That's amazing that the wisdom that was amongst you and that you were willing to actually soak that up like a sponge. And you said that you did everything that they told you to do. You didn't second guess it, you didn't question it, but you followed directions the first time given. So if you were talking to someone that's listening and or watching this evening, what advice might you give them? Someone that's right in the middle of an alcoholic battle and they don't seem to be able to rid themselves of it. Tiffany?
That you never quit quitting. You know, it's consumed my family, which is actually part of why I became a substance abuse counselor, is because I didn't understand how um addiction could just put such a vice grip on you that you just like lost all free will, and as long as you go to a meeting and you ask for help, grab it, and you don't need a permanent sponsor. Just like, have you been sober for like a year? Can you help me? And, you just do what is asked of you. The very first Christmas that I was sober, right? I'm sober for a few months. I like 6 months. I've got this little kid, and the holidays, there's a lot of alcohol on TV and everywhere. And
Right.
I went to a meeting, and they said, "Is there anything on your mind?" And I said, "I'm afraid to be alone. This is my first Christmas with my son. I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid of myself."
Hmm.
And that Christmas, 6 people from AA came to my house and celebrated Christmas with me.
Oh
They
my.
sang Christmas carols. We
Oh,
had dinner, pie. They took care of me,
that's
you
beautiful.
know.
Hmm.
So they gave me, the people that
Hmm.
helped me in a way that I was almost afraid of, like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want out of this? And
Yes.
what they wanted is they knew how bad what I was feeling, how bad it actually felt. And they didn't want anybody else to feel that. And they were willing to help me not feel that. If I could just be
Hmm.
humble. I was humble because I was slaughtered. I mean, I didn't have a choice at that point.
Hmm.
And as my sobriety began to grow, that lesson is still, I say all the time, God got that one. Humble, got it.
Yes.
I'm good. Please don't make me relearn that one. I'm good with that one.
Mhm.
And I understand how harmful and destructive it is. I understand what it does to the family. I experienced it. I watched with my own family, losing people dying, people, relapsing. And, there, it doesn't matter how bad it is, there is a way out.
That
There
is
is
so
a way
true.
out.
And sometimes the enemy wants us to think that our backs are against the wall and it's all over. And it's at that time that we should just end it. But that is definitely the time that we are pretty much at the bottom where, we say we had to hit rock bottom. That's the time when you're hitting that rock bottom. And then that's the time where we do have to cry out. We are Christian women, and this is a Christian platform, so that is the time where we have to cry out to the Lord and actually let him know that I am done. I cannot go a minute further with this. And then we watch the transformation happen. You know, then just like the butterfly has to break out of the butterfly starts in this little caterpillar state and it has to break out of that all that goo and all the shell and has to break through all that stuff. And at that time, no one is in there with that little caterpillar helping it to break out, is it? And at that time, the reason I'm saying that is because it only takes you and that decision to say, I'm going to do this. The sponsor can't tell you to do it. Your kiddo that you love so dearly can't tell you to do it. You had to make up in your mind at that time, I'm going to break out of this situation. And then if somebody would have came along and broke you out of it, like sometimes we get sober because our mother's gonna be mad at us, or our husband threatens to leave, or we might lose the kids to CPS. We can't get sober because of those reasons. We've got to know that this is our battle and we've got to get sober because this is something that we have to do for our very selves. Then the other support comes, the other people that you mentioned. Then those people come alongside of us and start helping us to move forward in the process. But first of all, it initially starts with you, those of you that are listening and watching tonight. And that's a hard thing. I worked in a rehab in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and people were dually diagnosed with mental illness and they had addiction going on. And many of those people would just be frequent flyers. They would come in for 3 months, they go out and be sober for 4 or 5 months, and they come right back around. They just keep coming in and out. And the reason being, many of them was because they weren't getting sober because of themselves and their own choices. It was because they were about to lose their kids. CPS had said, if you don't get sober, we're going to terminate your rights. Or the wife said, if you don't get sober, I am leaving. I'm out of here. Or the job said, if you don't get sober, you will no longer be employed here. So they were doing it for the wrong reasons. Now, under that type of pressure, yeah, it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to quit. And you probably really think you're going to quit, whomever's listening and watching. But those times are not the reason to make that decision. You got to come to the end of you. Like Tiffany said when she was on the floor, it said, I'm at the end. Now, I would like you to talk to us about how would a person realize that with all the trauma and all the hell that they have gone through or going through, how would they realize, Tiffany, that it is time now to let that go and move forward in a new life of transformation? When it seems like it's so dark, how in the world are they going to do it?
Well, they've probably tried everything else. Nothing else has worked. You know, when
Mm-hmm.
I was at my end, there was a mirror in my kitchen, and I would walk past the mirror and say, I hate you, talking to myself. And I didn't want to hate myself, you know. And on top of it, you know, for me was, you know, this little human, you know, loves me, needs me. I got to get it together. And, you know, for me, I did go to AA for my child, because the important thing that I think people don't get is he had more value to me than I did. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have value. He did. And
Mm-hmm.
when I went there and I knew that I had to be sober, I had to get it together. And I started getting it together, then it was like, so I'm like, this horrible human being that I am doesn't have to be here forever. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of where and Sherry Mayfield was already, you know, kind of gone out of my life because jobs changed, things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, like, what kind of person do I want to be? I want to be humble. And she was the most humble person I knew. So I wrote down the things that she did that I thought were humble, and I tried to copy it because I didn't naturally know how to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I found people that I thought were nice or kind or giving, and I did what they told me. And when it came down to like the people that worked with me would talk about do something nice for someone and make sure that it's anonymous. And I thought, oh, that'll be easy. No, that was not easy, because I didn't realize that I was always looking for acknowledgement somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to be taught how to live differently, because for most of my life it was survival. I hadn't learned the depth of character that most people would have learned growing up, because mine was, you know, the 911 emergency all the time. So I actually had to be taught some of the things that other people would, that we say very cavalier, they should know better. Not
Right.
always, not if we're not taught, that we don't know
Right.
better, and we do need to be taught.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I realized that I was worthy of being taught, it made it that much easier.
Yes. And how did you realize that you were worthy of being taught?
When I said those words to my son, when I told my son that I forgave him, and it was like, are you kidding me? Of course I forgave you. And it was only that moment that I realized, oh my, that's how God sees me. And
Yes.
during my early sobriety, and my sponsor would tell me, there's going to come a time when the only thing between you and a drink is your relationship with your higher power. So,
Okay.
and I was having a hard time, and I kept trying to call all the people that were on my 911 list, and I wasn't reaching anybody. And I started praying.
Mm-hmm.
So, God, I know I've been told that there's going to come a point when my only, you know, help is going to be my relationship with you. And I get that. And I said, please, God, please, I need a human. I'm afraid. Please, God, please help me. And
Mm-hmm.
I called my sponsor, and she said, come right over. And her roommate took my son for a walk. My son went for a walk, and he came home with a box. And the box he got for $1 on the sidewalk. And when he came home and he showed it to me, it's like I couldn't say it without crying for years. On the outside of the box is the Serenity Prayer, which is how you end all AA meetings. And when you
Mm-hmm.
open the box, it had clouds, and the top would open up. And then inside it said, I believe in you.
Oh my.
So I thought, I was
Oh
like,
my.
I couldn't even breathe. And I looked
Mm-hmm.
at my son, and I was like, and my friend was like, there was only one. It just happened to be on a shelf. He picked it out from like halfway down the street. It was $1, and all he had was $1 in his pocket. I was like, wow.
Oh my.
And to think like that intervention was done for me,
Wow.
you know, just for me. You're talking to me. You're telling me I believe in you. If you believe in me, then I need to learn how to believe in myself.
And from a little one, a little kiddo, so genuine, so pure and all, until that is really helped to transform the woman that you were at that time. And look how the Lord
Absolutely.
can take little things, sometimes things that we think that may be even insignificant, that he takes little things that sometimes we may think this will never happen from that situation or come from that person, but it just may be that very thing that we counted out that could not help us, that could be the very thing that we need to pull on to listen to and to help us. Somebody's listening to this tonight and watching that this podcast episode is the key to what they need to go ahead and get sober, go ahead and get the help that they need from the traumatic life that they've experienced, traumatic childhood that they've experienced. We, as two social workers sitting talking, yes, we know, how to counsel and how to walk someone through a difficult situation. Yet and still, as I said just a moment ago, that person has to show up to the table, however. You know, there's help out there, but you've got to do what Tiffany's doing tonight, coming on the podcast and sharing such deep personal hurts and pain that the Lord has healed her from, and she's been sober over, I think you said 19 years, yet and still she's here sharing, because this is even another layer of healing for her. It goes even deeper. The peace that God gives us, it can go even deeper. And when we pour into others, like you're pouring into them tonight, so in such a humble way, know that the Lord is pouring back into you. And I'm saying this because people out there that are so afraid of being embarrassed and so afraid to really show their true self, those very people are the ones that are always going to be locked up on the inside of themselves. We can fix ourselves up and look all pretty and all handsome and whatnot, but on the inside, there's still this dark, ugly person that needs to be freed. And that's what this is all about this evening. That the woman that's sitting in front of us tonight, Miss Tiffany, she cares about you. She has never met probably many of you, but because of the woman that she is a woman that's selfless and really cares about people and wants to see people whole and live their very best lives. Then she said, when I asked her to be on the podcast, and I said, go ahead and pray about what you want to share, she had no second thoughts when she thought about it, that it's time to share my story on a global platform, that this platform airs all over the world. And for that, I am grateful. I'm saying that to say that the crushing that you find yourselves under, someone that's listening and watching, you're being crushed, but the crushing is actually to produce the person that the Lord wants to have as a showcase. Like Tiffany right now, she is showing forth God's glory because of what he did for her. He is no respecter of persons. She wanted so badly to live a free, clean life, and the Lord gave it to her. And now she's pouring back into others. And so that is what we want to see happen with you all. Now, there's no magic pill. And I do want to ask Tiffany, as a professional social worker, what might she recommend if someone wants to reach out and get the help? I know you're a certified addictions counselor as well as, a mental health therapist, that specialty in certified addictions counseling. People that are listening, how might they reach out to an addictions counselor and begin the process of walking toward their healing?
The biggest problem always is the first phone call, right? So get a list, You can go to even your doctor, because I know that I'm listed with many doctors, and you tell your doctor, because your doctor needs to know that you have a problem too. They probably already know. And you just tell them, I need help getting clean and sober. And it is
Mhm.
definitely beneficial when you have a therapist and you have a sobriety program that you're working with. They work hand in hand to help you be successful. And the biggest
Mhm.
thing is just be honest and allow people to help you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And be honest with the medical. So you're saying a medical doctor, to be honest with that medical doctor first. And would the medical doctor be the person that might refer them over to someone like you then?
A medical doctor, and the reason why I say that is a lot of people don't understand, especially with alcoholism, that for some people, quitting on their own it can be terminal. So, I mean, it's very important, depending on the level of the disease, that they do speak to a doctor so that they make sure that they're going to be cared for. And then if they are not able to get someplace from, their doctor, go to Psychology Today. There's a million different websites that talk to you about mental health. Just look up substance abuse counselors in your area and a list of people will come up.
That's excellent. And also, you talked about building community, that they've got to build a community of support. Is that correct?
Yes, it's really important, and that's why I really think that AA is good, because there's nothing funnier than when somebody comes in to see me and they're hoping I'm going to tell them something different, and they went to a meeting and we both say the same things and they're like, "Oh, that's what they told me." And I was like, "Oh, great. Now why don't you ask your sponsor? Let's see what they say." And they talked to their sponsor, like, they said the same thing. And I was like, "Well, I know you feel special, but we're not all getting together and colluding against you. So if we're saying it, maybe it's true."
Right, right. Everyone sometimes doesn't have those ears, though, to want to receive what's being said, because they really want to hear someone say what they want to hear.
Mhm.
You see, but it's good when you don't say what they want to hear, because that's the beginning of really making them uncomfortable, because we can't be comfortable all the time and work on healing. Healing comes with a price. Wanting to be free comes with a price. And sometimes the price may cause us to be a little bit uncomfortable in order to get to where we're going. Now, I know you said in your bio that you are becoming an eye movement desensitization. I cannot pronounce that word. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapist. And so, tell us a little bit about that, and how is that going to help your clients, and especially those that are dealing with trauma?
Certainly. I do practice EMDR now, but certification is kind of a lengthy process, so I'm going through it. But EMDR helps. I have PTSD from my life. That's probably not a shocking thing for anyone. So I drank so I didn't feel. So the
Okay.
idea of doing the therapy is like, why are you drinking? So we got to figure out what was causing the behavior so we can fix that, and then we can help simultaneously keep you from drinking. EMDR helps to pinpoint traumatic events that have happened in your life, and through the process of the eye movement, it's kind of what one would equate to like REM sleep, when your eyes are back and forth. It just
Mhm.
takes whatever trauma was there and it helps your brain to process it. So it's no magic, it's your own brain working. The therapist is just the guide to kind of keep you on the road and allowing your brain to process. So whatever that traumatic event is, it takes the volume and turns it way down so that you don't feel that pain to that level anymore. So when you
And how
have that
often
turned down, it helps with healing.
and how often would a person have to meet with you to work on that process?
Um, EMDR is done on single events. So the normal amount of time can be anywhere between, the first, obviously getting to know the therapist, and then preparation, and then doing it. So usually anywhere between 2 to 6 sessions does an EMDR is done.
Okay, 2 to 6 sessions. That is something that sounds like a person that is in a traumatic state or has gone through a traumatic state that truly could help them to be able to move on. Now, many people struggle with pain in this world, and sometimes the idea of pain and God mixing that together can be somewhat confusing. Like, why would a loving God allow me to go through such pain? And so oftentimes people might not want to reach out to God and have faith and pray, and we're talked about and all of that. But I believe that, that sometimes the Lord does allow bad things to happen, but sometimes when these bad things are happening, they kind of push the person further into darkness. So before we end the podcast, we started off talking about, that you cried, some further down in the podcast, we talked about how you cried out to the Lord for help. And even in the middle of the beginning of the podcast, you talked about how your grandma had you reading the scriptures and at night so that you could go off to sleep. And then your friend, a very good friend of yours, helped you to know how to read the Bible and all. So I am bringing that back around because I feel, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that that was a foundation for you that kind of really gave you the wherewithal to be firm in the decision to move forward with seeking your healing. So now that everything has happened and it has brought you to be the woman that you are today, would you tell us how has your faith in God helped you, Tiffany, to be the woman that you are sitting before us tonight?
Well, I would say, and it's really important because at best example, when my mother was dying of ALS, people would try to be helpful and say, well, don't blame God. And I said, I'm not blaming God for my mother's ALS. Like, that wasn't even a thought, right? Like, why would you even think that? I never blamed him for things that were happening. And I watched, because unfortunately my brother's concept of God was, well, if God loved me, then he wouldn't have allowed Dad to do this to me. And mine was, we survived it because God was there so that we could, right? And my concept of it was different. And what is the difference to me? The people and the amount of exposure I had to those positive people in my life. I'm the oldest. I had more exposure to my grandmother. I had that around me more, and I think that helped me more. So I don't need excuses to have a miserable life. My life was already miserable, right?
Exactly.
So I already had pain. So being pushed in pain, I'm already in the pain. Pain's there. It's whether or not I want to be out of it. And my best efforts were not working. So, I'd say, like, if you don't believe it, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you just try it out for a while and see what happens? If your life doesn't get better, we'll be amazed. But just leap in, have just a faith, jump in and see what happens. Because I think people would be amazed.
That's excellent. And so with that being said, Tiffany isn't saying, nor am I saying, that the only way to healing is by reading the word and praying and fasting and going to church and being around Christian people, because we know that the Lord has also created people, given people knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, just like the medical doctors, like the therapists that the two of us are. He's given wisdom to you to be able to seek out these people. So oftentimes you've got to go outside of the four walls of the church, however, and step out into the arena of the secular world and seek the help that you need. So do not be afraid to seek the help of a mental health professional. Even if that mental health professional isn't a Christian therapist, I would first recommend you seek a Christian therapist out. But if you don't have a Christian therapist in your area, or if you don't care to have that advice, then seek out the help of a therapist, a trained, educated therapist that's culturally relevant that can help you walk that journey out. And then also, as Tiffany said, seek out the support of an AA group and a trauma informed therapist, and you will watch your life change. Small increments might be occurring, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to change, because it's with consistency where it changes. So I would encourage those that are listening tonight to know that trauma, it leaves us with many hard questions. And we want to know why it happened, and why did this happen to me, and how am I going to get out of it? But we're here tonight telling you that there is a way out of it. And I'm here telling you tonight that I don't have the answers as to why things happen and why the Lord allows certain people to go through certain things. But I know He's a loving and a just God, and that He is able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all we could ask or think, and that He can bring you through and make you better and make you to be a blessing to someone else. We just have to trust Him and have faith, and also get the help. And don't be afraid to reach out and get the help from a mental health therapist or trauma informed therapist and medical professionals, and a support system, even if it's outside of the four walls of your church, because the Lord has created other resources for you to take advantage of. Seek Him, ask Him for His guidance, and He will definitely lead you to where you need to be. I'm a witness of that, and my guest, Miss Tiffany, is a witness of that. I would like to thank you this evening for coming forth and sharing a bit of your story. Of course, we weren't able to talk about everything, but the nuggets that you did share this evening, I believe that lives have been changed because of hearing what you said, and such with such humility, Tiffany, and such courage, and such bravery, and laced with grace. So thank you so much for your willingness to share your personal testimony, one of resiliency. And I would like to say it has been a resilient life. All things weren't pretty as you were going through them, but somehow the Lord graced you, even as a little girl, to be able to get through what you have gone through and come out on the other side smelling like there was no smoke ever around you. When I met you when we were going through the school at Western Michigan University, our master's program, I wouldn't have never known that you had ever been through anything as you have shared. Listen, that's the kind of God we serve. He made you all over again. And I am just amazed at it. And I am so touched. And I want to tell you that your story has touched me. And your story is one that will live on forever in the hearts of those that have heard it. And I pray tonight that the Lord would pour back into you 100-fold of what you have poured out to us this evening, Tiffany. Would you like to share with the audience before we close anything that maybe we did not have a chance to talk about, or maybe something I didn't ask you before we close out the podcast this evening?
No, the only thing that I would say that I said a little bit before is for those that might slip or fall, don't quit quitting. Just get up and keep going, because that is it. You know, it's once you fall, it's okay that you fell. You just got to get back up. You have to just keep trying. It's active measures.
That's good. So if someone falls, meaning that they start on this journey and then they slip away or they relapse back into it, that doesn't mean that they should just stop and never
That's
try
right.
again.
That's right.
There are do-overs. Is that what you're
There are
saying?
do-overs. There's always a do-over.
Okay. Okay. And thank you again. Thank you for sharing so kindly with the audience this evening. And I want you to know that just having you here and listening to your story has just been amazing. I'm grateful. that we pressed on through the technical difficulties. Once again, I apologize for those. I never have had, my computer has literally shut down and all, and that is okay because we still were able to come through with what needed to be shared this evening. This is a gift. Just like Christmas coming up and people are out there getting all the gifts from the stores, this is a gift that you cannot buy in a store. So thank you so very much for being my special guest this evening on the Lotus Flower podcast as we talked about a life of resiliency, your life. Again, thank you. And I will look forward to having you on the podcast again because we got to come back and share part two because we didn't get to talk about everything.
Sounds
Yes.
good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. Give my love to your precious husband and to your family, and know that you are definitely a friend of mine, and we will stay in contact over the years